Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and some of my subscribers have awared me that Michael Trend made a statement saying deadlifts aren't necessary for back development. And they're wanting me to rip on good old Michael Trend, but the truth is he's not entirely wrong. Now, I'm going to give him a little bit of a hard time on some of it, but he's actually not wrong there. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit. Let's talk about this. And I think some people thought that because I love the deadlift, I think the deadlift is quite possibly the greatest exercise of all time, right? The barbell conventional deadlift. I love it. And actually, Micah said he loves the deadlift too, so I got to give credit for that. He loves the deadlift also. Now, I will say though, the deadlift can build one hell of a foundation for your back though. It absolutely can. Plenty of data on that. There's plenty of guys out there who don't even do what you would think of as direct lat work or any of that, who still have pretty impressive backs purely from things like deadlifts, cleans, things like that. Like, it can absolutely be done. Is it necessarily the most efficient way to do so? Probably not. I mean, I'll agree with that, but truth be told, there have been other people who've said the same thing, even on YouTube. Look, the deadlift will build the foundation for your back. The deadlift will build your entire back top to bottom. May not necessarily give you the aesthetics that you want for a lot of you guys, because there's more to that than your back, and that's where we can get into some debating. But will the deadlift build your middle traps? Will it build your lats? Will it build your erectors? All of that? Hell yeah, it will. Of course it will. And anyone who doesn't believe that the deadlift works the lats, there's plenty of data on the muscle activation showing that deadlifts actually outperform most of these cable exercises for even your lats, even though it's not technically a full range of motion exercise there. I mean, that would seem a bit counterintuitive. It would, because you would look at that and go, wait a minute, doesn't range of motion equate muscle fiber potential? Yeah, oftentimes it does. Generally speaking, not always, but the majority of the time, a longer range of motion or the longer effective range of motion on a muscle is going to equal more stimulation, more muscle fiber potential. So it does seem a bit confusing with the deadlift when we see that, but a lot of it could just have to do with the amount of total activity involved with the deadlift, all the radiant effect, everything else. But the deadlift will build your entire back to a pretty good extent. So if people want to stand there and say, well, it couldn't be the best foundational exercise for your back, well, no, they're wrong. It can be fantastic for that. But I think the problem we do run into when we're talking about strength versus hypertrophy, and it is very difficult to separate the two. I think people overstate that, and I think this is where Mike is kind of stating something that's somewhat true that even he doesn't even follow, because he deadlifts heavy, so that he can try to market a bunch of bullshit. Because that's what Michael Trend does. He sells bullshit. Let's be honest here. Mike, I know you got that smile, you get that, like, that charisma, you do that smile, that little ching happens when you off your tooth when you smile. You got those rugged good looks, all that growth hormone keeping you young. I'm sorry, the duck eggs, but let's be honest, man, you are a bit of a con man, right? You know you are. You know you are, Mike. I'm not saying you're not a nice guy. I'm not saying you're not jacked. I'm not saying you don't train hard, but you're a con man, and you know it. You know it. Come on, you can laugh about it behind the screen, because you're going to see this. You can laugh about it, Mike. You're a con man. Always trying to say, you always got an angle for an overpriced product. But the problem we do run into with the deadlift for total back development comes down to fatigue versus stimulation. The deadlift, set for set, even with tonnage moved, is enormously taxing. It is hard to recover from. It is very, very difficult to do any sort of significant training volume on the deadlift without burying yourself on the recovery end. It is. And that's coming from someone who you guys have seen me do 7 to 10 sets of deadlifts per session, even with fairly heavy weights, right? I've done it in the past. It's hard. It is hard to recover from. It affects everything else you do for the rest of the week. It's just difficult to get the volumes and the workloads in that you need for hypertrophy, even if you are getting a hell of a lot stronger on it. So there are other exercises that are a little bit better. Now, all this silly cable shit he's having you do, I don't know about all that, like he showed in the little ad below. Come on, Mike. You know that stuff doesn't work any better than the basics. I mean, truth be told, though, if someone really wanted a well-developed back, you get really strong on deadlifts and really strong on weighted pull-ups, you're going to have a jacked back, right? You're going to have a wide, thick, fully developed back. The problem, though, you do get into, I think, with a lot of what he's talking about with some of these actors and other people, maybe they're not trying to get really thick. Maybe they just want a wide back and they want rear delts and all this other stuff. And a lot of the aesthetics they're chasing, it has to do more with delts and rear delts and side delts and everything else. Well, the deadlift doesn't train any of that. Is that part of the back? I don't count the rear delt as part of the back, to be honest. I know a lot of bodybuilders do, but for me, when I think of things in terms of function in the body and everything else, and biomechanics and anatomy, I don't think of delts, rear delts as part of your back. That's part of your shoulders, really. It's shoulder development. Traps, we can get into a big debate, whether that's back or shoulders. But at a certain point, you do kind of got to say, all right, does anyone but bodybuilders really care about what part of the body it is? I care about movement patterns, right? We care about how strong does a muscle need to be to do a movement pattern, which is affected by how big it is. Size and strength cannot be completely separated. You cannot do it. You can skew them a little bit. You can skew them a little bit, but you can't separate them. And even Mike knows that. He knows that getting strong is the fastest way to get jacked. He trains heavy and he is strong, and he damn well knows it. He promotes power building. You can't separate the two. He knows it. The research backs it. But a lot of what he is having guys do is maybe not get quite as thick. In other words, maybe avoiding training the middle traps too much. Just trying to get their lats well developed, their rear delts well developed, side delts well developed. But kind of the point I would make with all of that, though, for most guys who aren't trying to maybe peak all of those things for some sort of physique competition, if you want all of that to be really jacked, if you get strong on the deadlift, weighted pull-up, standing barbell presses, right? Standing barbell presses. Your shoulders are going to be pretty well developed too. All that's going to be pretty big. It's going to be pretty big. You're going to be pretty jacked. And people talk about the aesthetics end of it. Look, a lot of aesthetics comes from genetics and drugs. Everything else is just about having a well-developed musculature and getting lean enough. So we kind of come back to that other point. You might not be winning bodybuilding shows, but for most of you guys, I think you don't care about winning bodybuilding shows. 99% of people even watching YouTube fitness will never step on a bodybuilding stage. Never going to step on a bodybuilding stage. Most of you guys just want to be jacked and in shape. Realistically speaking, if you get strong on those 3 exercises, your shoulders and back are going to be pretty well developed. And if you just diet down, lose the extra fat, get lean enough, you're probably going to have the look that you want, unless you've got some skewed idea of what that look's going to be. Now, you see a bunch of juiced up bodybuilders at contest time. If that's what you think you're supposed to look like, then, well, you're going to need to be a juiced up bodybuilder and diet down a contest lean and do contest peaking. But if you just want to look more jacked than most of the other guys in the gym, most of the other guys at the beach, that might not be necessary. You don't need all that. So we get into a big debate there. And I think ultimately, though, he's just selling programs at that point. He's just making that statement. Even though he deadlifts himself, he knows the deadlift is responsible for some of his own development, because Mike's a strong deadlifter. I'll admit that. He's a strong deadlifter. He knows deadlift's a valuable exercise. He's just trying to sell programs, trying to sell coaching, trying to sell training by making a statement like that the deadlift's not necessary. Well, I mean, I'll even agree the deadlift's not necessary. And like I've said, for even higher volumes of training, particularly if you're going to do a high volume of multiple exercises, maybe the normal deadlift might not be your first choice. I kind of agree with Dr. Mike on that, Mike Idriatel, that for higher volumes of training, if you're wanting a pulling exercise like that from the floor, snatch grip deadlifts, deficit deadlifts, things that reduce axial loading a little bit are actually a pretty good idea. You actually have a little bit more potential for hypertrophy versus fatigue, because that's really the only negative thing you can say about the deadlift, even for guys chasing size. It can be very tricky to balance getting enough workload, enough volume, enough training stress to cause maximum growth without overtraining, without just burying yourself. Because the deadlift will bury you. It absolutely will if you're not careful. It's just a tricky exercise. And I'm saying that as someone who loves the deadlift. I think it is one of the greatest exercises of all time, arguably, maybe tied for my favorite exercise, right? That and like the press. Deadlifts are awesome. But it can be a fatigue problem. Fatigue management, when you start deadlifting real heavy with a lot of volume, it can be a problem. And for some guys who are in a phase where they're chasing maximum size and they don't care as much about strength, all right, there could be a point to be made for that, up to a certain point. Doesn't mean they shouldn't be deadlifting, though. I really would rather see everyone deadlift. I just think that you're going to have to limit the amount of deadlifting you do. All right, that's what it comes down to. To say that you should be skipping it completely, I don't agree with that. You're going to have to greatly limit it at times and use other exercises to fill in that volume. And if that's a statement someone makes, I'm not going to disagree with that. There's truth to that. But everyone who can deadlift probably should be deadlifting. But at the end of the day, guys, this is, again, just Mike trying to sell coaching, making a statement like that. And like I said, when it comes down to it, Mike deadlifts. He knows that deadlift's a good exercise. He uses it. He's just trying to point out, hey, there's all these other exercises. Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, I would even ask anyone looking at those, are those really better than pull-ups? I mean, seriously, are any of those cable exercises? At the end of the day, anyone really think they can replace the weighted pull-up for upper back development, mid-back development? Come on. Weighted pull-ups combined with deadlifts, I mean, there's your key right there. You want a jacked back, you put those two exercises together, you build up a good strength and work capacity on them, your back is going to be jacked. Anything else that you're trying to do beyond that is just kind of trying to put icing on the cake after that. It really is. That should be your foundation right there. Just my opinion on it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.